Hey everyone, it's Ivan with kitbadger.com out here for another gear review, and today, again, talking night vision, talking about these guys right here, which are the PVS-31 Alphas. Before we dive in with my experience and things like that with this unit, we should talk about what they are. So PVS-31 Alphas, they are a dual tube night vision device that is made for the military, like US SOCOM, and with that, it being a military item, there was a lot of testing that went into it, and there is actually a contract for that. So with those contracts, you have very specific guidelines with respect to kind of all of your different specifications. So it needs to meet or exceed XYZ, whether it's waterproofing or figure merit, all of those things. But when we are talking about PVS-31 Alphas, we are talking about true Gen 3 white phos filmless tubes from L3 in PVS-31 housing. So we'll dive into some things that are kind of special and unique with respect to these units. First and foremost, dual tubes, articulated housing. Is that important? Yes, it is. I originally cut my teeth with some night vision back in '98 in the Marine Corps with PVS-7 Bravos. So 2 eyes to 1 tube. They were terrible. Trying to drive Humvees with them, not fun. Walk anything with them, horrible. Eventually, we ended up with PVS-14s in Afghanistan, and then I basically ended up leaving. Didn't have any experience with any of the military stuff until eventually putting in time with PVS-31. But big advantage, you have, again, binocular vision, and they are articulated, which makes a pretty big deal. Why does it matter? Well, on the one hand, there's just admin tasks, being able to just lift one out of the eye, be able to see ambient stuff, or if you need to go white light or something, or red light, whatever it may be, something maybe if you have the focus set somewhere further than 18 inches, which is about as close as it can focus, lift that thing up, little red light, like, oh cool, still on track, whatever it may be. Or for that matter, honestly, something that is really important is when you end up bringing these things up, if they're up like this, sitting out in front of you, undue strain on your neck. And being able to basically rotate these pieces back, you bring the weight further back towards your skull and your spine, way easier to support. And some of the other niceties, like on the sides, you have these adjustments so that every time you bring them in center, depending on where this piece is adjusted right here, it'll basically press the tube out. So for your eyes set, you can have it to where as soon as you bring them in, it's going to be perfectly centered over your eye. And then when you pop them out, you can move it however far you need to. But immediately come back to center directly over your eye. And another aspect that really cannot be overstated is weight. When you have things riding on top of your head, especially extended out in front of your actual center of gravity, we want as light as possible. And this unit with a battery right here in the center, one AA battery, you get about 15 hours of runtime off of that one battery. But with a battery, this unit weighs basically just shy of 1 pound, which is pretty awesome, especially when you look at other options as far as even like bridging to PVS-14s. Like, you have added weight and complexity. This eliminates some of that complexity and streamlines everything into a ultimately lighter package. And these being true PVS-31 Alphas, you also have it built to that specification. So ruggedness, durability, these things will be submerged up to, I think, 66 feet for 2 hours. I would not celebrate that or try it, but you can do that with them. So yes, if you're out on the range and it's pouring rain, they will be fine. And on top of that, just the base level that these need to meet in order to actually the base level they need to meet the criteria of that actual contract when it comes to performance too. And since these are in fact L3 PVS-31 Alphas, they have to meet that minimum specification. So we have unfilmed, technically really thin filmed, Gen 3 white phos tubes. So Gen 3, the most recent technology with respect to night vision, and with that, big takeaway, auto gating. So if I turn these on, probably won't burn them up. Not going to celebrate it here. But if you're in a totally dark structure, maybe a warehouse, you bust through a exterior door, you come out in a daylight, your tubes aren't going to burn up like Gen 2, where it doesn't have smart circuitry to basically reduce the amount of energy coming into the tubes. Protects itself. But as far as the actual resolution and overall figure of merit, which is factored by line pair per millimeter, which is your resolution. These, I believe, have to be over 64. And then your signal to noise ratio. Multiply those together, you get your figure of merit, which is largely kind of industry standard for looking at the quality of tubes. And these, per the contract specification, have to be at least, I believe it's 2370 something, about 2400 figure of merit, which is really good. And keep in mind the way contracts are written. That is a minimum spec. So these are above that. In that, if they don't meet that bare minimum right there, like they're scrap, well, they don't scrap those tubes, but they'll go sell them on to whoever, and someone else will put them into PVS-14 housing, whatever it may be. But to actually make it into these housings, they need to be at least 2400 figure of merit. And more often than not, you're getting something that exceeds that. So what is the FOM figure of merit on these tubes right here? I honestly don't know. These are actually a borrowed PVS-31 alphas from a friend, and issued goggles, which these may or may not be. I don't think there's ever been a data sheet that's came with them. Conversely though, if you actually buy L3 PVS-31 alphas, like 2 spec, you will get a data sheet that comes with them, and it'll show you the actual figure of merit, EBI, all those different specs as far as the actual tubes that are in here. Some really nice things though, I will say with these 31 units is, as I mentioned, weight, articulation, stuff like that. And then up front here, you press this, you depress it that way to turn it on. And then this right here is your gain control. You can access it that way. But then also over here on the side, you have a built-in port, like made to spec. And so with that, you can plug in an external power pack, which I believe has 4 AA batteries. That in turn will let you use this unit for, I believe, up to about 50 hours continuous use, which is significant. So now I guess it comes down to what has been my experience with these. As I went through my journey in my night vision series, initially starting with the Gen 2 Green Phos PVS-14, running on a Skull Crusher and a night vision course, upgrading from there to a Gen 3 L3 filmless white phos PVS-14, moving from that to bridging them, then eventually bridging them with like a pano bridge, and then finally this was kind of the last stop, using this in a Wilcox G24 mount, and having also kind of upgraded along the way through different helmet mounting solutions. Had this guy right here mounted onto my OpsCore ballistic helmet, and I ended up using this shooting a 3-day night vision course with AMTAC Shooting, and they did a really good job. I will say, big takeaway, which I already mentioned, lightweight, cannot be overstressed. And both using these or when we were not using them, being able to just flip them up, roll these things back, move the weight further back over my center of gravity, that absolutely was huge. And as I mentioned, the articulation, being able to lift it up, do some sort of task, for me personally, honestly, that's a big deal, especially when it comes to filming, because I'll lift this up, deal with my camera, something like that, drop it back down, good to go. And with these, the way you can basically set them, it's always dropping down centered over your eye. So you're not trying to adjust it like some of the different bridges and things along those lines. Does a really good job. And yeah, was able to shoot these and they did great. Since then, definitely put in more time with them, numerous runs through the shoot house and things along those lines.
A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment. Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction.
Coming away from it, I have been incredibly pleased with these PVS-31 Alphas. They have done amazing. I will say with them, you're gonna pay for it. Like, you can get a Gen 2 PVS-14, Gen 3 PVS-14, you can get two of them, you can bridge them, you can do all these things. Like, when you jump in the deep end with PVS-31 Alphas, like, you will pay for it. You're looking at around $13,500. Is that expensive? It's really expensive in that it's a lot of money, and it's really expensive if you don't use or train with it. So, I mean, do you have a need for night vision? If there is a check box there, then yeah, like, you're approaching basically the top end of what you can actually purchase and stuff that does a really good job. If you just want night vision, well, you can also check that box, and if you have the income, you can absolutely spend it. These are most certainly over off the deep end of night vision, but I definitely think if you actually have a use and application for it, it's huge. It's one of those, if you want to go out and you want to do some shooting with your buddies, with your PVS-14, that's great, and it'll totally do that. And if you want, you can even bridge them, whatever. If you are in a capacity where, one, you are going to professionally use these, or even if it's just a hobby, but you take it serious and are going to spend a lot of time with it, it ends up being money well spent for not only what you're getting as far as like that resolution, the figure of merit, which is going to be inherently high with these, but also durability, because it is decidedly an investment. And the other part of it, going back to weight, spending 6 hours at night with 1 pound right here, or 6 hours at night with 1.5 pounds or 2 pounds right here, that gets to be a really, really big deal, especially over the course of time. Again, think professionally, like over the course of months or years. That extra weight, extra strain on the neck, all of those things, very real. But I think these things are honestly pretty awesome. If you have a need or want some PVS-31 Alphas and have the income for it, I think there's definitely a value there. They're pretty solid. I would just encourage you to make sure you actually get true PVS-31 Alphas made by L3, because then they will actually, again, meet or exceed that specification. And they'll end up coming with a battery pack, kind of buried inside here. Cable routes forward, goes into the right side of the unit, as I mentioned, and you can go run around for like 50 uninterrupted hours in the dark if you so choose. Pretty sure it doesn't come with the Cry, I think this is their nightcap, but overall, really solid unit. And if you appreciate my content and want to support it, I greatly appreciate it. Whether it's liking and sharing videos or going over to kitbadger.com, picking up KBAT target pads, stickers, patches, things like that, or supporting me directly through Patreon. Over at Patreon, you usually get early access to videos, as well as we have our active Discord over there, And through that, happy to answer your questions, whether it's DMs or you can ask over on Discord. Happy to answer all of your questions. Usually get some kind of exclusive content as well occasionally, and just helps me go out, create more content for you. But as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time. And if you're wondering, I won a Pokemon tournament with my buddy and our respective kids. Kind of a big deal.